In the world of Dark Souls, magic is basically easy mode. In fact, if you were to ask a Souls nerd what they think about magic in these games, I'd bet my left foot that they'd say it's broken as hell. So when I decided to find out how hard Dark Souls is when you play as the Sorcerer, I just assumed it would be the easiest run so far. Boy, was I wrong. As usual, the rules are very simple. I can only use the Sorcerer's gear throughout the game, whether it be for dealing damage or defending myself from damage. Souls can be spent in any way I choose when it comes to leveling. The only rings I can utilize are the Orange Charred Ring and the Covenant of Artorias, because I consider them necessary. And while I was going to utilize my original rule of allowing temporary buffs and NPC summons after 5 and 10 failed boss attempts respectively, for this run I've decided to not allow them for one reason. See, in the beginning of the game, the Sorcerer only has access to 30 casts of the Soul Arrow spell. And while that may seem like a decent amount, in reality it isn't at all. As you journey throughout the game though, you are able to acquire 3 other copies of this spell, boosting the max cast you can have up to 120. So, as a special rule for this run, I will be able to buy these other copies of Soul Arrow, instead of using the aforementioned temporary buffs and NPCs. Did that make sense? I really hope it did. Anyway, the Sorcerer class starts off with the Sorcerer's Light armor set, which while despite obviously being on the lower end of the list defense-wise, unsurprisingly has the best magic defense of all the starting classes. When it comes to his shield, the Sorcerer gets the small leather shield. Now this shield is a perfect example of meh, with 80% physical defense, 35% magic defense, 60% defense for both fire and lightning, but absolutely dogshit stability. The Sorcerer also gets the basic run-of-the-mill dagger, just in case my magic runs out. Now, the dagger is not a top-tier weapon by any means, but what it does have is the quickest normal attacks in the game, so while it's not the hardest hitting weapon, you can most definitely make it work. But the real heavy hitter for this class is, as I've already said, its magic damage. And in this case, the damage will come from the Sorcerer Catalyst and the basic spell, Soul Arrow. Neither of these are the best versions of their kind, but what they do offer is something I haven't been able to utilize in these runs so far. Ranged attacks. Now this may not seem like a game changer, but believe me, in Dark Souls, anything that makes it easier to damage an enemy and make it harder for an enemy to damage you back is a big deal. And as to be expected, I chose the Master Key. Because of course I do. Now I've wasted enough of your time, so let's begin. I choose a fitting name, pick the Sorcerer, and wake up in my cell. Has anyone ever mentioned how much the framing of this makes it look like the cell key is a weird ghost fart? Because it kind of looks like a weird ghost fart. You know, with all the smoke and the fact that it's right above the hose pump. I'm not nuts, it looks like a weird I take the scenic route, gathering the shield, dagger, and my catalyst, and after traversing the fog, pull off the sickest ninja roll plunging attack you've ever seen. This does okay damage, but nothing substantial. So, I run away, whip the catalyst out, and as Frank Reynolds would say, start blasting. The Asylum Demon is too fat to keep up with me, and I finish him off without taking a hit. After making it to Filing Shrine, I trek up to the elevator and drop into the shaft to get myself some homeward bones, as well as some stray souls to start boosting my intelligence. Then, I take the elevator down to New Londo, picking up the first Firekeeper soul of the run to get my flask to +1. I breeze through the Undead Burg since I can take out 99% of the hollows before they themselves can get into striking range, but for some reason decide to try and fight one of the hollows throwing firebombs down onto the footbridge here. No idea why. The way up to the Taurus Demon is a little harder, as I'm trying to save my soul arrows, so I need to rely on my dagger. It's fine against one enemy, but it really shows its flaws against the mobs. During the Taurus Demon fight, I go for the classic plunging attack and almost screw it up. Somehow it still works, but the lack of damage the dagger puts out is noticeable. Otherwise, it's the same strategy as the Asylum Demon. Get me some distance and fire away with Soul Arrow. After 6 consecutive Soul Arrows, I actually stun the demon, which I didn't expect could happen. But otherwise, it's a very uneventful fight. I think I'm far enough away from the Hellkite Dragon's flames, but fuck me I guess, and use the ladder shortcut to get back to the bonfire, boosting my vitality and endurance a few levels. I then bait the dragon into dropping from its perch, but it sees through my ruse and ends up turning me to ash. Second time though, I slip past and make it through to Andre without taking a scratch. A simple fight with the Baronique Knight gets me the guaranteed Titanite shard alongside the second Firekeeper soul. I use said shard to upgrade my dagger to +1 since the catalyst cannot be upgraded, and head up to fight the gargoyles. Now there's two big issues with this fight. The first is that the speed in which the soul arrow travels is remarkably slow, and with the way the gargoyles jump around, I find myself wasting far more soul arrows than I feel I should. The second is the fact that the gargoyle's halberd has deceptively long range, so even if I feel that I'm safely far enough from them, they'll hit me regardless. Now this turns me into a bit of a panic roller, and it unfortunately gets me killed by rolling straight off the edge like a lemming. My second attempt though is far better strategy-wise. I follow the principle I used on the prior bosses and keep as much distance as I can. I still get hit a few times by the solo gargoyle, but by the time the second one spawns, I've gotten into the groove. Just fire away with soul arrows and their life bars slowly disappear, getting me the victory and the first bell. Eager to get more upgrades, I immediately head to the Moonlight Butterfly. Now the positive here is that I have a ranged attack, so there isn't long stretches of nothing but me dodging the magic attack the butterfly spits constantly, waiting for it to take its perch so I can fight back. The negative is that it's the Moonlight Butterfly, so I'm only doing 53 damage per soul arrow. It's something, but not much. And then there's a second negative, and that's when the Moonlight Butterfly does perch, I'm only doing 12 damage to it with my dagger, while two-handing. I thought this fight was going to be a cakewalk, but of course I never get any luck, do I? What followed was a needlessly long fight in which I run out of soul arrows and Estus flasks. The dagger's damage is so bad that it takes two two-handed R1s to take off a single tick of its health bar. Thankfully, fate was in my favour and I come through in the end. But after that fight, my hopes that this would be an easy run began to diminish significantly. The patheticness of my dagger so far really got to me, so I upgrade it once more and head back down to Filing Shrine. Here, I go pay Rickett a visit. Why? Because Rickett sells the first copy of Soul Arrow that I can purchase in the run. I could have bought this earlier, but I thought that maybe I should test how far 30 Soul Arrows would get me. Turns out it wasn't far, so I spent the souls and got myself the extra casts. I used the master key to take the back way down to Blighttown, and with my extra soul arrows, head into my showdown with Quelaag with a new vigor. The 74 damage from my soul arrows is only slightly better than what I was giving the Moonlight Butterfly, but since most of Quelaag's attacks have long windups, I have lots of time to back out of her range and cast a few arrows at her. 74 ain't great when it's a one-off, but 2 or 3 at a time means a pretty solid damage output. This is literally a foolproof plan. The Spider Witch has no way to counter it. In fact, if it weren't for me not noticing my surroundings and backing into one of the stray lava pools, I would have gotten through this fight without being hit at all. Extremely easy. I ring the second bell and send Ceaseless Discharge to its doom. Then I head back up, stopping along the way at the weird sewer drainage area to pick up another Firekeeper soul. I catch the crow back to the asylum with the intention of putting the stray demon in the dirt. But, as to be expected, I get fucked up by the weird fart gas immediately. I'm never not fucked up by the fart gas. The fart gas is the bane of my very existence. Second time round, same thing. And then it happened a third time, but the fourth time I actually died to a staff swing, so that was a nice change of pace. But I had had it by now, so I took a sabbatical from the tubby bastard, grabbed the peculiar doll, and headed back. Back in Lordran, I buy the residence key from the merchant in the Undead Burg and head down to rescue Griggs, since he sells more soul arrows. Then, I head off to fight the Capra Demon. My first attempt ends before it begins, as one of the hounds runs straight into me so the demon himself can get a swing in. I turn into a panic roller, and that makes things worse, getting me killed without even trying to fight back. My second attempt almost turns out worse than the first, as I nearly get rocked by both hounds, then almost get killed by them on top of the ledge, then almost get stuck up there with the Capra Demon himself. Thankfully, he slips off, and I get the chance to rain soul arrows down on top of him. These tear through him, and he goes down without a second thought. The soul arrow makes it easy to clear the hounds and butcher guarding the large ember, making that an easy get. And despite a rather awkward death to the gaping dragon on my first attempt, I then get another hitless victory by keeping to its flank and blasting away. I then trek back to Andre, giving him the Ember and getting my dagger to +6. On the way up Sen's Fortress, I take a detour through a brick wall and release Big Hat Logan, since he's got our last copy of Soul Arrow, which we'll need based upon the Iron Golem fight. Now, it wasn't a hard fight, since most of the Iron Golem's attacks require him to be in close quarters, and I could keep my distance. It's just that it took a staggering 58 Soul Arrows. Yeah, 58. Some brilliant stamina management as I slink along the rafters allows me to get to the Painted World, and despite a terrible attempt at the bridge shortcut, I make it to Priscilla pretty quickly. But then we hit a big wall. See, Priscilla's thing is that she becomes invisible when you hit her, after which she walks around the arena, attacking you until you either kill her or stun her out of the invisibility. It's usually a simple thing to get around. Usually. But see, my dagger at this point was not doing enough damage to stun her out of the invisibility. And the best way to hit her with magic is to lock on, which you can't do when she's invisible. So I, in my infinite luck, found myself in a cat and mouse game, in which I had to find Priscilla's footprints on the arena floor and free aim a spell in the hope that it would hit her. This is actually really hard. You might find her feet, but by the time the spell is cast, she could be in a different spot entirely. This, as you can probably tell, is not the best situation to be in. And unfortunately, I die once simply because I cannot get her to drop her invisibility cloak. On my second attempt, I spend over 20 souls trying to break the spell, consume all of my flasks and some humanities, and almost die multiple times. Until... when the veil was lifted, you have no idea how glad I was. Despite the fight not being over, I let out a sigh of relief and resigned myself to the classic tactic of cast and run. Thankfully, past this, the fight became 50 times simpler, and despite the fight taking almost 8 minutes, I beat her and managed to escape the Painted World. In a rare moment of luck for me, I somehow survive a lightning bolt to the back as I run past the gross pink demon things. Then, I barely survive the archers because I forgot I had the catalyst out instead of the dagger. But, after this, I meet the giant blacksmith, get said dagger to +8, and then head to Ornstein and Smo to give them a thrashing. Now, despite taking a few early hits simply due to the fact that I was getting too greedy too early, I quickly fell into the rhythm of avoiding Ornstein's spear and then using his brief recovery window to cast a Soul Arrow at him. My damage is absolutely horrid, and if I even think about casting at the wrong time, I find myself eating a bolt of lightning in return. But this fight isn't really much of a challenge. It's actually pretty easy to telegraph Ornstein when he's 50 feet away from you. So once I got my groove, I cruised through the first phase without ever being in too much trouble. The second phase is actually easier than the first. Super Smo gets himself stuck on the pillars just trying to catch up to me, and surprisingly my Soul Arrow does more damage to him in the second phase than it did to Ornstein in the first. I also managed to stun him a few times with a consistent barrage of Soul Arrows. He dies easily, without any hassle. Now, I'm not going to show what happened next because this is a family show, but it really ticked off Gwendolyn. Before I put him in the dirt though, I walked back to Firelink Shrine and got myself the final Soul Arrow from Big Hat Logan, maxing out my potential casts at 120. I thought they'd be needed for the next part, but they weren't because I forgot I hadn't increased my attunement enough to be able to equip them, because I'm smart and stuff. As for Gwendolyn, he was a pushover. Run around his weak magic beams, hide behind pillars when he casts the little gemstones or shoot arrows at you, then sprint up and slice him like a Christmas ham. It'll be over before you know it. I upgrade my dagger a little more, getting it to a clean +10, and head back to the asylum for another stab, pun intended, at this stray demon. As to be expected, the red Farkas catches me immediately, and in my haste to escape the follow-up attack, I get knocked into oblivion. Second time round, I decide to completely forgo the magic attack for a more traditional slice and dice with the dagger. The damage is obviously less per hit, drastically so, but since I can get 3 or 4 hits off each time, the overall output is far superior. I slice his health bar up so bad that it turns out to be one of the easiest fights in the run so far. I use these souls to buy the Crest of Artorias, opening up the path to Seath, who I immediately figure out within 10 seconds of the fight. Standing right in front of Seath and rolling backwards from its attacks will quickly make Seath jump backwards, and then run up to attack you. You can cast a soul arrow after every back roll, and another when Seath runs towards you. If you can keep up with that strat and not get greedy like I did at one point, this is yet another incredibly easy fight. I take an offer I can't refuse, that being eaten by a giant snake with a Fu Manchu mustache, place the Lord Vessel to open the golden fog doors, and journey down to the demon ruins to give the Fire Sage what for. Great first try. It was just getting my timing down. It was a better second try, but, fuck ass, of course. Third attempt, the demon just changed the fuck ass. I don't know why, does he just know my weakness? Fourth attempt, I do the exact same as I did in the Stray fight. Throw the magic out the window and stab him in the gullet like Chucky. This gets me the victory, as the Fire Sage is kind of a pushover when he can't cast Farcast at me. My first go at the Centipede Demon isn't bad, but my usual strategy of circling around to the large island to the right of the fog door unfortunately leads to some problems. I make it there on my first attempt, and after luring the Centipede to the island with me, I switch to the dagger to make it a bit easier. But I'm only doing 44 damage at plus 10. That's not good. I died. That's also not good. But then the second attempt came, and somehow it managed to get worse. For whatever reason, despite healing to max health, I began dying as I tried to get across the lava, and I have no idea why. This happened several times, and if I did manage to get across, my casting time would get me killed. So, one of the easiest bosses in the game has suddenly become one of the toughest. So, I gave the Centipede the battle, and headed back to New Londo to lower the water, collect some Titanite chunks, and pick up the very large ember. This got my dagger to plus 12, so as a celebration, I decided to give the Four Kings a quick shot. And I got wrecked. I went back to the Centipede, deciding to do a hybrid assault, starting off with a bunch of soul arrows until the Centipede was on the island with me, then switching to my dagger, getting underneath, and then swinging for the fences. It takes 3 strikes with the dagger to do more damage than 1 soul arrow, but I can do it more consistently, getting upwards of 5 attacks before my stamina runs out. Since it's easy to avoid its attacks when you're underneath it, the Centipede becomes a cakewalk, and I deal with it quickly. But it was at this time I started to wonder if magic really was the way in this run. My intelligence was at 40 by this point, and that is essentially the soft cap for damage since you can't upgrade the catalyst. So, from then on, I decided that maybe putting a bit more into Dex was the play. Anyway, after trekking through the lava fields of Izalith, I head into the Bed of Chaos fight and take out the first bulb before doing my usual and running directly into 3 consecutive attacks. The second run though, I completely forget what I'm doing and run directly at the Bed of Chaos, instead of to the left like I should have. This gets me slapped around like a fight against Nate Diaz. Third time round, I get fantastic luck, and immediately drop into a volcanic explosion of flames, because fuck me, I guess. Fourth time though, I get the bulb and manage to make it to the center of chaos and stab the hell out of it, getting myself a Lord Soul. With my last visit to Andre, I max out the dagger, and then I rush back to Firelink and by extension, the Catacombs, to kill off Pinwheel, who goes down pretty quickly, getting me the Mask of the Child again. I clear out the basin of crystal golems, die to the Hydra in a way that was totally unavoidable, twice, before executing the multi-headed monstrosity and meeting Dusk. Towards the Archives, the Boar and I compete in a totally fair one-on-one duel. I kill the stray crystal golem for the pendant and cut up the crystal warrior to give Seath a taste of his own medicine. Now this obviously didn't work, but that's supposed to happen, so don't blame me. Anyways, I cruise through the rest of the Archives and the crystal caves that follow it to fight Seath. Now, I was under the assumption that Seath was extremely resistant to magic, so instead of even daring to try my soul arrows, I whip out the dagger and head straight to one of his tails. This strat is excruciatingly easy. All you have to do is hack at one of the side tails and then follow it around as Seath turns towards you. You can avoid about 90% of the attacks that Seath spits out at you, making him a cakewalk. Second Lord Soul down, I chose to take on the DLC, so it's the battle with the Sanctuary Guardian next. All the practice that I had done in the Thief run went right out the window, as I immediately began getting run over, shocked, poisoned, and bitch-slapped with the Guardian's tail. The dagger's range is so short that even if I ran straight up to the creature's side to strike it, the Guardian won't be able to turn out of my range before I hit it. This, coupled with the fact that the Guardian can strike back in a millisecond, gets me killed a few more times than I feel it should. Eventually though, I get into my groove, to handing the dagger and slowly whittling down the Guardian's health until it can't fight back. In the Artorias fight, I hit the biggest roadblock of the run so far. I have to be way closer to Artorias than I'd like for the dagger to actually hit him, meaning that dodging away will still leave me in his range, and when I do hit, it's for only 49 points of damage. And when Artorias tries to buff himself, I pull out the catalyst to hit him with the soul arrow, and that does a staggering 14 damage. In case you didn't know already, that's really bad damage. So, after several long attempts in which I found myself getting fucked over and over and over, I decide to give Artorias the win and retreat to rethink my strategy. My way to fix these issues? Soul farming. Now, for those who don't know, in the Painted World there is a phalanx, which appears at no other point in the game. It sits right next to a gate near the first bonfire, which, when opened, allows you to run straight to the phalanx and kill it for several thousand souls a run. It's one of the best soul farms in the game, and by far the easiest at this point. I did this for a while, boosting my dex and my health a little bit. This helped heaps, giving me a momentous 59 damage with the dagger instead of 49. Totally worth it. And after a few more tries at Artorias, some grinding of my teeth and ripping of my hair, I then noticed something that I cannot believe I hadn't before. And that's that the dagger's two-handed R2 isn't a slash. It's a big stab attack that did 120 damage. That countered the ranged issue I was having, and it did more than 2 R1s with one attack. That's an actual game changer. So, after this revelation, Artorias' difficulty fell off drastically. It was still a challenge, don't get me wrong, but it was much, much easier. And after 13 long attempts, I finally slayed the Abyss Walker and fell back with a sigh. My good friend Golf does me a solid, putting Calamite and I on equal footing for our war, and surprisingly this time around Calamite wasn't that big of a deal. I kept the dagger out, stuck to his legs, and gave him everything I had. There were a few close calls to be honest, but not once was I ever in real danger. He went down on my first try. With only Manus left to finish the DLC, I chose to forego magic once again simply because I'd more or less given up on it at this point. So it was melee all the way, and despite it being the better option, Manus clearly didn't give a shit. 9 straight attempts ended in failure. Crushed by his giant hand, bombarded by magic bowling balls, and I ended up rage quitting and spent 3 days away from the game. But when I came back, I gave Nito a try, and I got erased by the skeletons before Nito even attacked me. But I kept going, and I still couldn't get anywhere in the fight, dying 2 more times. So it was back to the soul farming. I was at the point where it took about 7 or 8 circuits to get 1 level, and it only increased every time. So, one night, I spent nearly 3 hours getting myself over 10 levels, boosting my dex to 40 and vitality to 30. I hoped this would be enough. I then also did something I usually never do, and that's getting the 5th Firekeeper soul from the Dark Moon Knightess in Anor Londo. Thankfully, these investments into my character did wonders. I was doing more damage, obviously, but the big thing was that I could finally survive Manus' magic attacks. This gave me the confidence to be a little more aggressive, and it got me the victory on my 10th overall attempt. As soon as I was out of the Abyss, I headed straight for the Four Kings with revenge on my mind. The dagger here worked absolute wonders, doing over 200 damage per two-handed R2, which I could chain if I managed to get behind one of the kings. And if I used R1s instead, I'd still get upwards of 500 damage per combination. I'd use the souls from Manus to boost my vitality a little more, and this allowed me to take almost all of the king's attacks without any fear. Because of this, I was able to cut down each of the kings before the next showed up, and I managed to get the victory. That meant Nito was the only one left before the finale, and as with the last few battles, the soul farming really helped me out. The damage boost let me cut down the skeletons fast enough that they couldn't gang up on me, and if I managed to get a combo off on Nito himself, I was doing over 750 damage. It was just a matter of following that pattern, and the Lord of the Dead got sent back to his grave once and for all. With all 4 Lord Souls in my possession, I offered them at the vessel to open the kiln of the first flame, and headed straight through to Gwyn's fog door. My plan was simple: parry and riposte. I'd done it 100 times before, so why couldn't I do it now? I traversed the fog, approached the dying king, and completely missed the parry. Then, in my shock, Gwyn grabbed me and threw me back towards the fog gate, as if to say, get the fuck out of here. But that wasn't going to stop me, was it? Second try, I missed the parry, got hit again, and got the lucky parry on the return swing. This kept me alive, but I fell into a rhythm of taking the first hit and trying to parry the second, with mediocre results. I died again. Third try, I got completely eradicated. Same on the fourth. In fifth. So I tried new tactics, forgoing the parry and just trying a strategy based around dodging. This had some success, but it still resulted in me dying. And so began an endless chain of me trying to fight Gwyn one-on-one and getting destroyed like Tokyo in a Godzilla film. I had no idea what was happening. For once in all my time playing this game, Gwyn was a legitimately challenging fight. Was it my timing? I tried parrying the knights outside his arena and I was hitting it perfectly. Was it the shield? I looked up the small leather shield and I found no reason why it could be the parrying window. I couldn't figure it out. 5 days of attempts. So many that I couldn't record them all. Then it hit me. If I took a hit while my stamina bar was even slightly empty, I would get stunned, because I had barely leveled stamina in this run due to the investments everywhere else. With a mixture of annoyance and relief, I did the only thing I could. I headed back to the Painted World and farmed a shitload of souls. I boosted my stamina to 30 and vitality to almost 40. With this, I hit level 120, the highest of any run so far, and then went back to kill the king and end his reign. Upon entering the arena, I took a deep breath and I rolled through his first attack. Panic set in and I took several hits, but I managed to get some distance and heal up. Then, when I was ready, Gwyn swung, I hit L2, and bam, I parried him. The riposte did a fantastic 824 damage. That's when I knew I had him. Dodging the failed king's feeble attempt at a grab, I parried again, and another chunk of health evaporated in front of my eyes. Gwyn kept getting up, and he kept fighting back, but it wasn't enough. I kept landing parries and ripostes, and after the 4th time, I added insult to injury and finished Gwyn with 2 simple stabs. Game over. There you have it. Dark Souls as the Sorcerer. Now, despite my belief that this would be one of the easier runs, I'd be lying if I said it was. Soul Arrow is such a weak spell that even past the soft cap of 40 intelligence, it deals utterly atrocious damage in the late game, and I had to completely change the build's focus to melee to find success. If I had to say, this is definitely one of the worst starting classes. Its gear is completely mediocre to me, even at high levels and maxed out, and if I were to give anyone doing one of these starting class runs one piece of advice, it'd be to choose another class. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked it, subscribe, but till next time, bye bye.